You guys. All right, everybody. Double checking. It's been a while. Waiting for the video to show up on the stream. There we go. There we go. All right, everybody. Welcome to the 95th episode of Real Hawk Talk. I am Bryant Nemhauser. It has been a long time since we've had an opportunity to talk with all of you. Really happy to be back tonight. A lot to go over so much happening in the real world and in the football world, and we will try to get you prepared for the draft. Before we get into all of that, a programming note. I'm gonna ask Evan to go over the whole setup we've got, but a couple things to be aware of. We've added a new feature to being a patron. We would really hope to do some gathering events during the off season. That's probably not going to happen. Newsflash there. Not going to be gathering anytime soon, at least in person. But we now have a Slack instance for patrons, and you're going to get that. That's been set up. It's an opportunity for us to hang out with you guys after and between the shows and talk Seahawks, talk other stuff. So it's been great to get that in there. If you haven't already joined over on patreon.com/hawkblogger, please do that. Jump on in. If you have any questions about getting in after being a patron, ask Evan. It's all his fault. So, it's on him. One of the cool things that's going to be happening, and let me pull Evan in to talk about it, is how that's going to be operating during the draft over the next few days. So first of all, welcome to the show, Evan Hill at Evan SEA on Twitter. How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing well, and it is Evan in SEA, Brian Nemhauser. We've only done this. We've only done this 400 times. So, no. On that note, we have a ton of content for the draft that I am super excited about. Sort of piggybacking off the Slack introduction that we've introduced for Patreon members. If you're a Patreon member and you're in that Slack group, you will notice that there is a live thread channel. So what does that mean? This is an experiment for us. This is something new. I'm not sure if you guys listen to other podcasts or whether they're sports or politics or whatever it is, but there's a lot of podcasts out there that do like live chat threads, either in Slack or Skype, or it's typically Slack, but basically it's a way to live stream our thoughts in a very organized way while not providing, video or audio commentary. So I'm throwing a ton of stuff at you guys. What does this mean? So long story short, this is what's going to happen. You will tune into YouTube for our live reactions every single day of the draft. So that includes tomorrow night, Friday night, and Saturday morning. So this is how it's going to work. So you'll see like Real Hawk Talk episode, whatever the heck it is, day one of the draft, whatever. And for the first part of the show, when Seattle is not picking, so whenever the Bengals are picking or all the other teams in the NFL, we will be live discussing our thoughts in that Slack thread. If you're a Patreon member, you can interact with us in that live Slack thread, respond to us in threads. You can use your emoji permission use, or you can watch directly on YouTube. So what does that mean? We will be broadcasting like a screen share of that Slack thread. I don't think it's going to have any music, not at first at least, but so during non-Seattle picks, basically.
Evan, if we were going to do music, what kind of music would we do?
Classical music, absolutely.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Okay.
It's the best form of music.
What kind of classical music? Like what qualifies as classical music in your mind?
Like Mozart, right?
I just say, Alexa, shuffle classical music. Okay. And that's my version of classical music.
Okay. As long as you weren't going to say like, Pearl Jam or something like that.
No, of course not. So to wrap up this thought, basically once Seattle is on the clock, we are going to transition to video audio reactions like we're doing right now and give you our live reactions. This is there's two reasons why we're doing this. Number one, entertainment value. And number two, I'm pretty sure Brian just wants our reactions on the record so he can go back and pull them up after the fact. So
on that note, and I'll bring the other two fellows in here in a second, one of my favorite pieces of content that I've seen in the last year, bar none, is Mina reacting to the DK Metcalf draft pick. If you have not seen that, you need to Google it. You need to watch the clip. It's hard to find actually now, and maybe Mina will be kind enough to share it again at some point. But she, like, you could tell she's been talking draft all day, like the whole time. It's a long process. It gets to the pick, and they announce DK Metcalf, and she literally goes, "Oh!" She like guttural, like just deep, like flexes, like on screen. She was so pumped, so excited. That is what I want to get on screen. Most of the time, I think we're going to get Evan looking confused and, maybe making squeals of noises that we won't really register for a while. But those are things we want to get on video and we want to have ability to return to later on. So,
So the clear takeaway here, though, for everyone listening, is that it'll be on the same link. So we'll transition from that live Slack thread to our video and audio reactions, and then back to the live thread after Seattle is done picking. So I'm excited about it. It's a lot of content. We're going to be doing a lot of shows over the next few days, and I'm excited about it.
Thank you to Jack M for donating Super Chat. Really appreciate it. And we will talk about some of the options at edge and other things in the draft coming up, including the one that you mentioned, Jack. Before we do that, let's bring in the other two fellas. We got at Real Jeff Simmons up there in Canada. No immigration, dude. Stay where you are.
Okay, I can't come across the border. I can't come visit.
I don't think that would be wise for multiple reasons.
How you guys doing,
man?
I'm starting to settle in a bit. It's been a long couple weeks. I'm just super excited for this weekend. At the best of times, I'm a big draft guy. It's one of the ways I got really into the NFL was just watching the draft, and the fact that like we don't have sports for the foreseeable future and a lot of people can't work right now. I don't know if I've been as excited as anything as I've been for this event, just based on the fact that I haven't had anything to like new to watch in terms of sports. And so I'm just super excited for this weekend. Tomorrow will probably be a quiet day for Seattle, but the next 3 days, I think there's a lot to look forward to until they ultimately disappoint us. But
don't start taking that tack. So that's gonna be my position this time. I'm really counting on you and our next host we're bringing in here at Nathan E11, Nathan Ernst. You guys have invested a lot in actually looking at some of these players coming into the draft. I've invested pretty much nothing in evaluating players. So, my point of view should be taken with even more of a grain of salt than normal. Welcome to the show, Nathan. How are you?
Pretty good. You've been doing all that TikTok scouting though, right?
TikTok is so funny, man. It's so funny. I literally I got to, like, one of my dreams came true today when I legitimately got to tell someone on my team, I need you to go watch TikTok. I need you to research this, this, and this about how people are creating these videos. And it was a legitimate request. And I feel like it was a milestone for me in my professional life.
That is, I'm jealous. I'm jealous that your business life and TikTok life have converged.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, yes, Evan, what do you
quick interjection. Say? Is this a similar sort of instance like the Starfish booty tweet that came up, I believe, in a work meeting?
Yeah, it's
Wait, that came up in a work meeting?
That got presented in an executive meeting.
No way.
Boy, the Starfish. Yeah, hell yeah. we have fun on our team. So, hey, no, seriously though, I got to say a few things, and I need you guys to help me on this, because what people don't know, and one of the reasons we built this Slack channel is because our private group DM for Real Hawk Talk, which includes, the four of us plus Will and Cable Thanos, Josh. Am I missing anybody? There's probably somebody else, but anyway, at least those six. And a lot of the time it is, some of the folks on this call really just fear and loathing and uncertainty and doubt about the Seahawks, about everything going wrong and how terrible things are. And I'm like, oh my God, this is so annoying. Why can't you guys just relax? It's going to be fine. I'll tell you where I am after the press conference yesterday. The Pete Carroll, John Schneider press conference, which was interesting for a number of reasons. It seems very unlikely at this point that they're going to get Jadeveon Clowney back. Seems like that's a stretch at best. It seems like they also do not have particular interest in spending meaningful money on the edge or the pass rushing position in free agency, which makes it pretty unlikely that they're going to acquire Everson Griffin or that they're going to trade for and sign someone like Onic or Yannick or however it's pronounced. I will work on pronouncing his name if he ever becomes a Seahawk. And that John Schneider went as far as to say, the Clowney thing, we just had to move on and conduct our business. We eventually had to move on. And that means that Benson Mayowa, Bruce Irvin equals moving on. Guys, I'm not happy with where we are. I'm not happy with what this looks like. And I'll tell you what, I don't want to start, being gloom and doom, but I'm not excited about this draft. I'm going into this. I need you guys to tell me who we can pick if the Seahawks name this player or two players that you think is going to legitimately be meaningfully impactful for this team and that realistically this team could get. Because if they draft some edge rusher in the first round, I'm going to be pretty frustrated. I don't think that person's going to have any impact. And so I'm struggling a little bit. We have 75 offensive linemen. We have one edge rusher. So help me. Let's start there. And I'm going to start with you, Nathan. Give me a name. Give me two names where if you heard them called and it doesn't have to be a first round, but you're like, this is a player that if the Seahawks land this guy, we're going to be excited. Tell me about it.
So I'll start a little bit more general, and then we can talk about players. So I would say that while there aren't many edge players that I'm really in love with, or even defensive line players, they aren't without some merit, right? I mean, I'm not a big Yetter Gross Matos guy, but you can spin the story about why he'll be good. Julian Akwara, you can spin the story about why he'll be good. Even guys like Raekwon Davis, who is expected to go a little later, that's a guy that you could really probably talk yourself into. The thing that's weird about this draft is it's very strong in some areas that don't exactly line up with what Seattle needs. So Seattle needs to either go against the grain and hit, which they have done before, right? They're not a team that's afraid to go against the grain. Or they could lean into offense, right? Which isn't something that we've seen a lot of from them, but not crazy to think they could do, right? They've drafted a ton of offensive linemen. There's a couple interesting guys that could be drafted here. And with, Dwayne Brown not getting any younger, then maybe they go with Austin Jackson, maybe Mekhi Becton, whatever his name is. That's a guy that you could talk yourself into real fast if he manages to fall to them. Even guys like Isaiah Wilson, have some upside and some interest. So those guys are all interesting from an offensive line perspective. And even though they've spent there, if they find a right tackle that they think can be the left tackle of the future, that provides a lot of impact immediately and long term. But, the guys to get really excited about in this class are the wide receivers, right? If they pull out Denzel Mims, it's not crazy to think that he could have a DK-esque year. If they pull out Jalen Reagor, another guy that could be really impactful for them, right? You can go down the line on wide receivers that would be really interesting. And this team has some depth there, but nobody that's a really strong third wide receiver candidate. So if they really wanted to lean into the offense, right, they could really bolster that side of the ball, even with the other side continuing to be a question mark. And, look, that was the case last year and they won a playoff game. So if they get even better on offense and maybe if they evolve a little bit, maybe they get a little bit better on fourth downs, maybe if they pass a little bit more or do some more creative stuff there, then maybe they can get considerably better.
My God, it has really been a while. I forgot about fourth down being a thing. For a second, I was like, why is fourth down? And I was like, oh God, yeah, that was a thing. That was
it's still a thing. It didn't stop being a thing. Yeah.
Oh man. So Jeff, what I'm hearing from Nathan is the draft is strong, potentially on offense, and the story there that it sounds like Nathan would be excited about is, all right, not looking great on defense. Let's just get stronger on offense. Thinking about this team, what they need to be competitive, what they need to be good. Tell me, what's your script? What does it look like? What does the Seahawks draft look like that makes this team a contender this year?
So just a spoiler alert before I get into this. I have an article coming out tomorrow, and it's going to kind of prepare everyone for the draft. And I go literally position by position on the Seahawks, starting at quarterback all the way down to safety, and literally run through their decisions at the first round. So I go through the running back they might look for. I advise obviously against taking them, the receivers I like, the defensive ends, and I literally go where the depth is at each position. So I think that's a good way. If you guys want to give that a read tomorrow, it's a good way to get ready. I'm going to do the same Friday morning. But to answer your question, I think Nathan hit on a lot of the points that I had going into it. And I think the tricky part for Seattle, and Brian, you touched on this a few minutes ago, is that there's one clear need on this team. They need to get speed and explosion off the edge. But we've known from this draft, and why we all thought free agency would be so prioritized in this area, is there's Chase Young at the top. But then the difference between the guys kind of around at 27 versus someone you can get maybe with your picks towards the end of the second round, I don't think there's a big difference there. And to me, that's why when I see a guy like Gross Matos or someone who keeps being mocked to Seattle, I don't love that, because 30 or 40 picks later, I don't think there's a big difference. So to me, I think I'm with Nathan in terms of I like the idea of a receiver. And to me, if you look at KC and you look at San Francisco last year, the two best teams in the NFL, other than Baltimore, instead of trying to fill deficiencies, they built positions of strength. Mm-hmm. San Francisco had that defensive line, and they had invested Armstead, Buckner, and then they drafted Bosa. KC had Hill and Watkins and Kelsey, and they drafted Hardman. Seattle's best competitive advantage outside of their quarterback, and even including the quarterback, is right now the receiver group. And when Tyler Lockett went out last year, around week 10, and he got hurt, the passing game really took a step back when David Moore and Malik Turner and all those guys. And to me, if you can add a third guy into that option, that does a couple things. It gives you depth in case there's an injury, and it gives you a three-headed monster with those two tight ends and with Russell. And all of a sudden, you really have a position of strength. And I think, to me, that's a lot more powerful than trying to fill a deficiency at a weak spot of a draft. And too many times, I've talked about this in a Real Talk thread, the Seahawks have hyper-focused on one position. With Jermaine Ifedi in that 1 year, it was LJ Collier, it was Rashad Penny. And rather than taking and building a strength, they tried to fill a deficiency and took a weak player. And that's what worries me going into this draft. I can mention a couple other positions later, but to me, I would not hit on the strength of the draft, maybe even a corner. They have Dunbar and they have Griffin. Maybe draft a really high nickel corner, build a position of strength, because I think that more than anything, when you have Russell, I think that's the way you compete, because I don't think you can fix all their holes on defense in one draft.
Yeah. So Evan, I really just want to get your reaction to, I've got information on what the Seahawks are going to spend their pick on, and I want you to tell me how you're going to feel when they pick Jonathan Taylor.
Brian.
Evan.
If that happens, I feel like you might have a worse reaction than me. You might be sent over the edge, Brian. You might be thrown off the cliff. I know you didn't like the Rashad Penny pick. I truly believe, Brian, your reaction would be worse than mine. In an entertainment value perspective, but also in a this is heads need to roll type of decision.
And when you guys are reading my article tomorrow, read the running back section. I think you'll get a kick out of that.
Evan will run the gamut of emotions and be ready to buy a Taylor jersey within an hour.
100%. 100%. Well, no, Evan, seriously though. I mean, what have we learned about, let's take a few seconds all around the room. We're going to go over what have we learned about how John Schneider and this team approach the draft. What are their general approaches, right? I'll go through a couple. I'll leave some for you guys as well. generally trade down in the first round, right? Like that's pretty much known that in general, they're trading down in the first round. What people don't realize is that he trades up often in the second, third, fourth round. So it's not that Schneider always trades back. He usually trades out of the first. He trades up in the later rounds. Another thing that we know is that, to Jeff's point, when there are positions of strength, and this, by the way, is probably my biggest beef with John Schneider's drafting philosophy. When there are positions of strength, what John Schneider does is he leverages that depth of that position, and he says, oh, there'll be a good enough player later because there's so many good players at that position. I'm going to go take the best of a position where there's not a lot of strength, where there's thin depth at that position. LJ Collier's a perfect example of that kind of drafting philosophy. And he says, there's a huge drop off from LJ Collier to the next edge player available. So I'm going to get him while I can. Well, guess what? You got a far inferior player than who you could have gotten with that pick. You're not getting a good value for that pick. That drives me absolutely nuts. So I would much rather, to Jeff's point, see them hit on a great player where there's a position of strength, maybe even take two players at a position of strength in the draft, than reach for, the best of the worst. And I think we've seen John Schneider do that before. So Evan, talk to me. I mean, when you're a John Schneider fan, to say the least, what do you brace for when you get ready for his draft? What do you look forward to? What are some of the things you've learned about how he approaches it?
I mean, obviously well, let me start on this. Actually, I think the COVID situation has a very real impact on this year's draft, but I think especially reinforcing John Schneider's like historical patterns of trading back. I think their goal this year, as it is every year, is to trade back, accumulate as many picks as possible, and hope 3 to 4 of those guys end up being solid contributors, down the line. This year, obviously, in the pre-draft process, teams were extremely limited in terms of how they could approach players, interact with them pretty much only digitally. Pre-draft workouts were extremely limited. Basically, teams have a lot less information this year than they do in typical drafts. That results in increased risk taking basically this year. And I think more so than, pretty much every year, I think John Schneider is going to look to aggressively trade back. However, I will say with the caveat here is I feel like last year, John Schneider took a little bit too of an aggressive approach in trading back and ended up not getting super great value when sliding down from that end of the first to like the top of the second. I think if John is going to trade back this year, the capital has to be there. It has to be a good deal. It can't just be a trade back and get more picks. Honestly, I fully agree with what you said though, Brian, on the whole best player available and like need thing. Need should be nowhere near this team's radar, in my opinion. There's so many holes on this roster. There's so many different areas that they need to add talent that at pretty much every position, excluding the quarterback position, I don't care what position it is. If there's a really, supremely talented player there.
You do for one.
What was that?
You do for one position. If
running
they took
back.
A running back.
Oh, yeah.
They took a running back.
Of course. But regardless, like I think there's so many positions of need that sticking at 27 might not be the worst idea. The one position that I am low-key hoping they stick at 27 and pick is actually tackle. I think Dwayne Brown is on the decline. I would not be surprised if this is a crazy take, but like I wouldn't be surprised if he retired in a year or 2 years. I don't think he has a ton of NFL life left in him. Obviously, right tackle is a major issue. A couple names they could target at 27, Josh Jones, Austin Jackson. That's my hope, but my fear is that they'll be pressured into taking, some really subpar pass rusher at 27, where that's just not the strength of the draft, really, in terms of where Seattle is picking. The pass rush the pass rushing situation is so dire in terms of how they approached free agency and pretty much abstained from paying anybody any significant amount of money, that not only did they not re-sign Clowney for what is looking like $13-14 million a year on the open market right now, they didn't go out and get any of those value edge rushers that we've been talking about for the last 3 to 4 months. So my greatest fear is that they feel pressured into taking an edge rusher too early and don't end up getting a good talent at 27. So I have concerns.
Let's talk about this, Nathan and Jeff. So
Sure.
Their first round picks since 2010. I'm going to run through them real quick. It's not going to take very long. You had Russell Okung, who was a 6th overall pick, right? So very different classification than they've had other times. Earl Thomas at 14. Those are both in 2010. So you have an offensive tackle safety, James Carpenter, a tackle, who ended up playing guard, but they drafted him to be a tackle. Bruce Irvin, defensive line. Defensive end is who they drafted him to be. No pick. Jermaine Ifedi, drafted to be a tackle. No pick. Rashad Penny and LJ Collier. So out of their 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 first round picks that they've ever made, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 have been either offensive linemen or defensive linemen. Seems like a pattern.
Yeah.
So they have, and of those, 1, 2, 3 have been offensive tackles. So, we do have some question marks on that position. Nathan, do you believe that is the most likely, if they stay and they pick in the first round, do you think that offensive tackle is the most likely position they will select?
I really have no idea. I mean, they've done a good enough job just putting together like workable depth at all positions that it's hard to say what is the biggest need. Like where they need the biggest splash player is still probably defensive end, but like you could argue that they need, a big upgrade over Brandon Shell and the long-term Dwayne Brown replacement too. So but then it's complicated too in that, the draft doesn't really line up with their needs particularly well this year. So I think I would probably still lean defensive line just because I think there's a bigger overall need there, and they, have gone there a couple times now in the first round. But it's really hard to kind of say with where how this draft falls and what they need. Like, what exactly are they gonna try to do?
Is there an offensive tackle or a defensive end that you'd be excited and that's realistic? So, I mean, obviously Chase Young. We're not talking about Chase Young. Is there
I don't know. I heard that in the mock draft, John tried to trade up to 11.
Yeah,
not a lot farther to go to get to 2.
He talked to the Jets. Yeah, they're like, "Why are you calling us?" Is there an offensive tackle or an edge rusher? Doesn't even actually be an edge rusher. Even can be a defensive interior tackle rusher that you believe realistically could hit the Seahawks at 27. Let's not even assume a trade back. That you'd be excited for them to get?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think especially offensive tackle. I mean, it's hard, right? Like Isaiah Wilson, Austin Jackson. Who's the other one? It's Josh Jones, the Houston.
Josh Jones.
Yep.
Houston.
Yeah. Today, am I really excited about them being a first round pick? Yeah, I'm pretty excited about that. I mean, not anything crazy, right? But again, like the idea of somebody that can play right tackle in the beginning and then move over and replace Dwayne Brown in a year or two when he retires, or maybe you move on from him. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think that's really sound. Those are good players. Yeah, that's cool. The awesome thing about the draft is no matter who they take, I guarantee all of us will be on here on a podcast Thursday night, Friday night, or Saturday saying, I've really talked myself into this guy. Like, we'll all get excited. The draft is nothing if not possibility and potential and we'll all work ourselves, into a lather over it. We'll all be excited.
Do not group me like in the same category as Evan. I have a take and I stick with it. I did not like the Rashad Penny pick, and I never changed that point of view. I did not like the Jermaine Ifedi pick. I never changed that point of view. I know Evan liked both of those picks and has liked them the whole time. So let's just be serious about that.
You're trolling me right
One thing
now, right?
Evan is known for, it's his consistent take.
You're trolling me on the Jermaine pick, though, right?
I know. At least on that one.
Okay. Don't you dare slander me in a positive statement.
No. You definitely went through a phase where you were talking yourself into Ifedi being good with Solari.
Okay. Yeah, that was for like 4 weeks. And then I realized Solari was a steaming pile of garbage. So
Wow.
Jeff, how about you? I gotta say, like, I'm so frustrated, guys. I wanna get there, but I've basically just been biding my time. I'm looking for them to make the moves to make this defense good enough to make this a contending team. They draft an offensive tackle, and even if he's a good offensive tackle, is that gonna, tell me why I should be excited about that?
And it's tricky because there's not going to be an offseason program. If they're taking an offensive tackle, Brian, it's not for 2020. It's for the future. So that's not going to help you because people have hit on this. Dwayne Brown's going to be 35. I talk about this. If they take one of the guys like Austin Jackson, he's 20 years old. He's one of the youngest prospects in the draft. He's not going to be ready to play in 2020. He's your long-term answer at left tackle. That's a good team building move, but that's not going to make you better now. So that's not going to help. Right tackle, Shell will probably start. He had some stretches where PFF graded him very highly in pass protection. There were stretches. And someone like Isaiah Wilson, he's someone who can compete, but he might not take over until the second year. So those are long-term building strategies because they don't really have a long-term answer at either tackle spot. So defensively, there's some guys at defensive end. There's some defensive tackles, I think, on day 2. There's even a linebacker I would look at, KJ Wright's in the last year of his contract. They really struggled covering intermediate areas of the field last year. They were slow against the Rams. They were slow against the Niners. There's some guys I can like there, but
you talking about Patrick Queen?
Yeah, like Patrick Queen's a guy, if they took a linebacker first round, that's not a premium position. They have KJ Wright, but if they can get a guy like that, an explosive player to pair with Bobby Wagner and a guy who can cover George Kittle, a guy who can cover the Rams slot receivers. Like I can talk myself into that because another thing you didn't mention was Schneider. Not only does he trade back, all the times he picks people out of nowhere, like guys that weren't on any media boards. When they took Bruce Irvin or Carp or Penny, like that shocked everyone.
I think Patrick Queen is an interesting sleeper to kind of talk about. I mean, I think everyone's about him. Yeah, I mean, I think everyone's reaction to them taking an off-ball linebacker is going to be well, probably what my reaction was when I saw people mocking them taking him, and like, why the hell are they taking a linebacker? Like, but he's a guy that, he's got a little bit of that kind of Myles Jack or Levante David type, and that speed. And you look at how they wanted to play against the Rams and some of these teams, and you can talk yourself into that making sense. He's not a like a Reggie Ragland type. Who is Levon Kirkland? Who is the middle linebacker?
The neck roll?
We had like 300 pounds. He's not that dude, right? Roll. Yeah. He's not like an Aaron Curry or whatever. I mean, he might suck like Aaron Curry sucked, but like he won't suck for the same reasons. I don't think Patrick Queen's crazy. And again, like this is the guy that I think will make people scratch their head when he gets picked, if he gets picked by Seattle. And then, we'll pull the Evan, and within about an hour or 2 hours after we watch the hype videos and everything, we'll all be kind of like, these custom jerseys, Patrick Queen. Yeah. All right.
Queen would be a sweet Seahawks jersey. I would take that jersey. There's a lot of fun you could have with that. So, look, let's talk about this team's. We talked about needs going into the offseason. Talked about cornerback, nickelback, and specifically. Interesting comments from Schneider about Quentin Dunbar. He can play inside. He can play outside. He made a point. He said inside first. So that's at least something to be aware of. Maybe they see Dunbar as a potential nickel option. We talked about defensive line, both end and tackle. I think we all agree those are both still needs, not just end, but tackle on this team. We talked about wide receiver being a need. They did sign Philip Dorsett, but I think we all agree that that's still someplace that they could add to. Running back, controversial for various reasons. You've got Chris Carson coming off an injury. You've got Rashad Penny coming off a major injury. Let's stop there for a second. Evan, is running back a need for this team? Not should they draft one in the first round, but is running back a need for this team?
Yeah. Yes, it is. I would say yes. And where's the best place to find that value relative to the incredible needs they have all across the roster and how it matches up to the positional strengths of this draft? Yeah, it's absolutely a need. I have no problem with them drafting a running back. Jeff said that the end of the third round. I think you said, Jeff.
That's the earliest. That is the earliest.
Yeah. Anything in like that third, fourth, fifth round range, I'm comfortable with. Some, there's the extremists who will only say UDFA or seventh round, but honestly, I think anything beyond a fourth round pick is pretty much a crapshoot. So I have yes. The answer to your question is yes. I just don't want to see them use a high pick on it.
What's the pick that you'd be okay with?
I'm not looking at Seattle's.
Just give me a round. It doesn't matter if they have a pick.
Fourth round. And actually, let me follow up on that thought real quick. The reason I think it's a need is because I think they should let Chris Carson walk. I think extending Carson would be a big mistake. I think he's going to come in around the $8-9 million range if he hits free agency. I think investing that type of money in him is a bad idea, especially with his fumbling issues, which have been obviously super concerning. So,
all right, I'm gonna based on inside info, assume that I think Nathan and Jeff agree that running back is a position that is not the worst thing for them to add to one way, shape, or form in their current situation. So, what I want from you, Nathan, and you, Jeff, what round would you be comfortable with the Seahawks spending a pick on a running back? Nathan?
I think ideally you don't take one before the fifth. Fourth round, especially with where Seattle's usually picking their, comp picks or whatever, sure. But I think it's hard to justify going much higher, if at all, than that.
Jeff?
I'd be fine anywhere. Like ideally, fourth, fifth round. But if they use their 101, I think that's where their comp pick is. I don't think it's the end of the world. That's basically a fourth round pick. If they got a running back, I like anything above that to me. If they take Jonathan Taylor first round or on a slight move down, I don't think there's any clear sign.
Big news. Sorry, I have to interject. Breaking news. The Raiders and the Jags are close to a trade involving Yannick for a first round pick.
Wow. Who's saying that?
Walter Football, who's, a pretty good source.
I feel like the life just went out of Brian a little bit on that. Brian, you're holding out hope. You had your two superstar. You wanted the Packers. I
told you guys. I didn't need that news.
Did you hear John yesterday though? Did you see him? We set our expectations all wrong, and
I see it differently, Jeff. I don't think we set our expectations wrong. I think their plan was shit.
I agree with that.
That's what it comes down to. Like this was absolutely on a platter for them to address their biggest weakness from a cap situation, from a players that were available. They could have gone big and gotten big name players potentially. They could have gone cheap and got a bunch of second tier or second and third tier pass rushers. They didn't do either. And so now they've basically got rotational players that you have to hope somehow hit. And I could even make the case, if I really wanted to push it, you could make the case their pass rush on paper right now could be better than it was last year. I actually, so I'm not crazy about it. I actually think you have to remember how bad this pass rush was last year.
I guess that's not saying very much.
Right. It's not. It's a low bar. And I think they could be better. Do I think they could be good? No way. This is not a good pass rush. I don't see any path to it being a good pass rush as it is. And I just think their plan was crap. And I had too much faith in the way that they've approached this.
Yeah, maybe that's my point.
Than the way that they approached it now. So hopefully they come back and make me look stupid for saying it. But as of right now, there's not a lot of reason to expect they're going to add more than just, maybe Ezekiel Ansah kind of like shots in the dark the rest of the way.
Yeah. John had a throwaway line yesterday. I mentioned it to you guys in the chat, and none of the other real beat writers picked up on it. Brady Henderson was the only one who did. He wrote a story on O-line today, and he had a couple interesting nuggets in there. But John, and we kind of went back and forth on this, John kind of threw a thing. They're no longer spend big on outside free agent team, he said. And I thought that jumped off the page to me because that explains why we've all been scratching our heads the whole offseason, because they've let tons of opportunities. So we looked at Quinn, we looked at Fowler. Based on what he said yesterday, they might not have been in any of those. And when Clowney came up yesterday, I know Evan saw this, he just looked beaten down when that question came up.
Oh, I actually meant to clip that later on. Brian, Nathan, did you guys see that response into the Clowney question? It was not so much what he said, but how he said it. It was so his response just reeked of like somberness and disappointment and kind of shock. Jeff, am I wrong in any of those descriptions? But
on a scale of like normal, happy, peppy, John Schneider pre-draft presser to just drafted LJ Collier in the first round post-draft presser, where did he fall?
Beyond the LJ Collier pick.
Yeah, he looked rattled, man.
It was the most somber I have ever heard John Schneider speak or say. It was
he turned it around into a shot on Joe, right? On Joe Fan.
Yeah, he asked him if that was his real name.
He did.
He did. But he looked like he was struggling with the draft process. His trade thing didn't work out well. He had his house ripped apart. He said he had like 27 screens going on. This whole thing just
honestly make a lot of sense, to be honest.
No, he looked out of his element, man.
Okay, it's gonna be okay though. I'm gonna call my shot here, okay? Because Seattle just traded a 5th round pick for Quentin Dunbar, who was PFF's second best cornerback, right, last year. And so my prediction here is that John Schneider is going to trade like a 4th or 5th round pick for the second best PFF pass rusher. So I think we're going to get like Myles Garrett for like maybe a 6th round pick. I think that's coming. We just got to be patient. He's got it all lined up. It's going to happen.
That would be great, since Garrett probably won't play till like 2022.
No, he got reinstated. Did
he really?
Yeah.
I didn't know it was official. I thought it was
argue about this. He should have never been suspended for the rest of the year like that. That was a way overreaction.
Dude, he could have killed that dude.
I mean,
Mason Rudolph was asking. I
know he was asking for it.
He was asking for a fight. He was picking the fight.
People act like Mason Rudolph is blameless when he definitely is not.
Oh, 100%.
That's the issue, though.
Oh my God, the guy's a total D-bag. I mean, that's not even in question. But when you swing, like Myles Garrett is not Jason Myers, and when he swings that helmet at a dome, he can do some real damage. I mean, we could have witnessed someone murdered on national TV. So, like, I don't know if I can really say Garrett did not deserve. He lost his cool big time, and just like Evan did right there. But anyway. I will say on the running back position, I'm of two minds on this, guys. I don't believe they need a running back this year because Chris Carson's leaving next year. I'd be fine with them drafting a running back next year if that was the case. Running backs can come in and play right away. I'm not worried about that. But I am concerned that we do not have a single running back that you can trust to carry the ball, when the season starts. I don't think we know how Chris Carson's health is going to be, or if he's going to be able to remain durable. So I do think they need to add a running back. As far as around, I mean, honestly, if there's a guy that's great, 3rd round or lower, I wouldn't totally hate that. But generally speaking, I like undrafted free agent running backs. There's always undrafted free agent running backs that are worth going after. So I'd like to see him pile up a little bit there. All right. What about tight end? And this is not. This sounds a little tongue in cheek, but there's a lot of drafts that have mocked Hunter Bryant, University of Washington tight end, to the Seahawks. Where are you guys on that, Evan? I mean, what's your point of view on whether the Seahawks should consider adding a player like Hunter Bryant, even though they got every other tight end in the National Football League?
One of you draft guys confirm this for me. Is he projected like top 3 rounds? Isn't he like third round, second round, maybe
third round,
maybe third round?
I think it's a thin enough tight end class that he might surprise and go higher, just kind of because of his profile and projectability and all that.
I mean, we have so many tight ends right now. Like, who do we have on the roster right now? Greg Olsen, Will Dissly, Jacob Hollister, Luke Wilson.
Ed Dixon still, right? Is he still?
No, he got cut.
No, he did get cut.
I did get cut. Yeah.
He got cut.
I mean,
George Fant
still around?
No, George Fant's not there.
I mean, those are 4 pretty decent tight ends. Like, Greg Olsen could very well have a very productive year.
His film was interesting to me. I watched some film the other day.
On Greg Olsen?
Yeah.
What'd you take away?
Interesting.
If he's healthy, which is obviously the biggest if, he can still play, man.
Totally.
I think there's a reason Russell wanted him. We talked about that quick game so much last year, and when Will Dissly went out, that quick game was just gone. And Olsen is a pure middle of the field player. He doesn't have deep speed anymore, but if you have him and Dissly and the deep speed they have, that really extends what you can do in the passing game. And I think he's just a professional guy. Like, have you guys ever watched that Amazon show, All or Nothing? Have you guys ever seen that?
Yeah.
Snips.
They were with Carolina a lot 2 years ago, and Olsen's just like in a team with Luke Kuechly and Cam and Julius Peppers. Like, Olsen's the alpha male there. And like, I think he's an interesting player, but he's got to stay healthy. He's like 37 years old, so who knows?
Isn't he only 33?
Yeah,
am I wrong?
That's old for a tight end.
Yeah, he's old, man. But back to what you were saying.
Yeah.
I think there's a reason they lined up all these tight ends with this draft. And the Seahawks pretty much give a tell in that area usually. The 2 areas they loaded up on are considered the 2 weakest area of the draft: interior offensive line and tight end. And they loaded up at both spots. They need guys who can play now. I saw like Mike Garofalo mention a tight end I didn't even heard of that was like rising up board today that the Seahawks had talked to, from like UCLA or something. I never even heard the name. So if they take him, I'm going to have to convince myself into him, as Nathan just said. But I would be really surprised, given all their needs, if they went with tight ends with 4 pro guys on the roster.
But I don't know. I mean, yes, I would be surprised if they went early, just again because it's not a great class and all that. But you've got one guy who's shredded his knee a few different ways. You've got one guy who, if he retired before the season, I don't think anyone would be shocked. And you have Jacob Hollister. So while that upside is fine and will probably be fine, it's not crazy to think that they might be trying to find somebody that could be a little bit more of a longer term thing they can bank on, especially with tight ends taking a little bit to develop.
Yeah. I wouldn't hate it. I mean, partly just because I like Hunter Bryant. I think he's going to be a good player in the league, and I think putting him with Russell for the next few years, I like that. I think he's got a lot of potential. So I wouldn't hate that particular pick. In general, I'm not looking for them to add at the tight end spot. I'd much rather them dip into the wide receiver pool. I am kind of curious for you guys, if the Onic announcement turns out to be official, how would you have felt if you had just found out that the Seahawks traded the 27th pick for him?
Pretty upset, honestly. I don't think they're one player away or even close. And it's pick 19 that's looking, because the Raiders have 2 first-round picks. Mm-hmm. It's looking like pick 19 is going to be the one that's given to the Jags.
Oh, I think you're on mute, Nathan. Or there you go.
I am on mute. I just don't love trading to pay a player. I don't know.
Jeff?
I wouldn't like it.
Like, I can convince myself into it, but just from a team building perspective, they have so much area they need to fill out and to not only give up a pick that can turn into other picks, but to pay him like $20 million on top of that. It would just reemphasize how bad their offseason approach was at defensive end. I think that would just double down on just how terrible they've left themselves at that one spot.
Well, the correct answer to that question is to be excited, because it would have been great to have that player on our roster instead of anyone that I've heard talked about for our first round pick so far on this show. Oh my God. I honestly, it's hard for me to relate. I get the team building part, but you got the money to spend. That's not the issue. We can afford it. That's not the issue. So you're basically saying that you'd rather roll the dice that this first round pick that they're going to spend is going to be more impactful to this team than a young, accomplished pass rusher who we all agree they're probably not going to find in this draft. And there doesn't seem to be any other option for how to get that guy.
Yeah, but
my issue with that perspective, though, Brian, is they're not one player away from seriously.
If they sign Clowney, you think they're Clowney away? You've been asking for Clowney.
I do not think they're one player away from seriously contending for a Super Bowl. Absolutely not. Even if they have Clowney, I don't think they're even a few players away. I think they're that deficient of talent. Am I wrong?
Yeah, I think you're way wrong.
Really?
Yeah.
They're not one player away from being a favorite, but they are one player away from, like, they are a one of the upper echelon players away from being, a legit contender.
I agree with that.
Oh, I don't know if I buy that.
Yeah, I think there's a big difference between being like a 49ers or Rams team from the past couple of years or a 2013 Seahawks where you were the prohibitive favorite. You were the most talented team, and if things go relatively according to plan, you should win. You should at least get to the Super Bowl and you should win. Versus a team that has clearly the talent to achieve that level, but you have to have some things go right. The Seahawks last year, it wasn't a super stretch for them to make a run in the playoffs, and they were a pretty flawed team. Like, they still almost beat the Packers. And I mean, they had major flaws on that team and the injuries that they were facing as well. So I think their secondary is better. I think Jermaine Ifedi's not on this team, which is already, and I'm not saying that just to be silly. Like, he not being on the team is a big freaking deal.
So many penalties. So many.
And you got DK Metcalf as his second year. He's going to get better at receiver. You got Phillip Dorsett. Like, you got better tight end options for sure. I mean, Jacob Hollister was your tight end last year for them a lot of the year. That was it. Imagine if Disley and Greg Olsen are healthy. Like, that's a big question. But like, I'm struggling to, and we know their secondary is better. Basically, we're a pass rush away from being a legitimate contender.
Brian, can I hit you with a draft question from one of our Patreon supporters?
Not until you answer what I just said. Why don't you think that we are not a legitimate contender with a pass rush?
I don't buy it. Like, I don't think that defense is suddenly, like, where would you rank this defense right now? Like, across the league, where would you rank them?
20 to 25.
20 to
20 to
23, somewhere in there.
So if let's say they re-sign Clowney in a perfect world, and they add a pass rusher at 27, I don't know, whoever it is, where does that defense end up in terms of on paper ranking?
Well, I think Brian's question is more if you sign Clowney and trade for Yannick.
But
No. Let's just go with one player, because Evan said we're not one player away. So let's say one quality pass rusher. And for me, Yannick is definitely a better pass rusher than Clowney.
Sure. Yeah.
But I know Nathan and I don't see that the same way. I think that's pretty clear cut. Pick which one you like better. Doesn't matter. I think that if the Seahawks have a alpha pass rusher with the addition of Irvin and Mayoa and Reed playing for the full year, I think that that's enough for them to be meaningfully better as a pass rushing unit than they were last year. And I think that that's enough for them to be a strong contender.
I hate that you're talking me into optimism right now. It's really concerning to me.
There is a big difference. There's a big question about how much does pass rush matter and all that. And Clowney's best at run defense, and we can talk about how much that matters too. But I don't think it's crazy to think that, a Clowney or Yannick could take this defense from a 20 to 25 to more in that like 15 range. And that's not a small jump, really, right? I mean, if you're talking about a great offense and a bad defense, compared to a great offense and an average defense, that's considerably better. So, if you think that a Clowney can move you up, 5 spots, in defensive rankings, and you think they're around 20 or something like that, then yeah, I mean, that puts them much more comfortably in, legit contender territory.
Yeah.
I mean, what were the Chiefs? I don't think
exactly.
I don't think the Seahawks are going to hit that peak, offensively, but like they weren't much different than that kind of build.
Yeah, and Jeff, I mean, look, if you do have some sort of like legitimate starting pass rusher, and it can be inside or outside. I don't think it's just an edge rusher, but a legitimate impact pass rusher to that team. And you've got Quentin Dunbar now, and we got to see what Ugo Amadi is going to mean. And you get a full season of Quandre Diggs, and we see if maybe Marquise Blair can actually break into the starting lineup. Like, I think there is reason to be positive, but that's a big freaking hole. It's a big hole, and there's no freaking plan to address it. So that's why it's just crazy to me that you guys would be more excited for them to draft Isaiah Wilson at 27 than to bring in a legitimate pass rusher. I don't get it.
I think it's just a question of whether you're looking short-term or long-term, right? I think short-term, yeah, obviously Yannick makes you a lot better than probably anyone you draft for the first couple of years. But for me, I just philosophically don't like the idea of trading a high pick to then turn around and spend a bunch of money on a guy. And, Clowney, or and Clowney too, probably. But Yannick is not Von Miller. He's not Khalil Mack. He is not one of the top defensive ends in the league. So you're trading a lot. That's
where we see it differently. So if you don't think he's one of the top 5 to 10 defensive ends in the league, then I can understand why you don't want to.
Well, and I don't think there's any question, right, that he's not one of those guys. Like, you have Khalil Mack, you have the Bosas, you've got, I mean, there's a lot of guys out there that like are better players than him, right? And that's not like he's bad, right? This is the whole thing with like Clowney, where he's like a very good pass rusher, but not an elite pass rusher. I think Yannick is a good, very good player, but not an elite, great player. Yeah, and so that's just another thing to me where I'm just,
he's Cliff Averill to me.
Yeah, but I think that's what Nathan just described. No, like that's what Cliff Averill was.
Did you guys see his tweets to the Jags?
Yannick?
Yeah. Oh, Yannick, the GM guy or whatever.
The owner's son, yeah.
What? Is that the owner's son?
Yeah. So the Jags are a really weird organization where they kind of keep giving him these jobs where he just doesn't have a football background. He's like was an early adopter on analytics, and he was really good, but they are just such a dysfunctional. Like, they're analytics heavy, but they drafted Leonard Fournette over Watson and Mahomes, and they trade everyone. They're just. We think the Seahawks are screwed up like the Jaguars are. They could be a 30 for 30 on those guys.
All right, I ranted. I cut off a Patreon question. Mea culpa. Evan, hit us with the Patreon question from the Slack chat.
It's actually, I'm just going to hit you with this question, Brian, since you typically do all the question asking. Controversial, discussion in Seahawks fan circles is wide receiver truly a need? Obviously, they hit on DK Metcalf last year. He's a blue chip player. They have Tyler Lockett, who's a stud. Signed Philip Dorsett, as we've talked about. How much of a need is wide receiver? Would you be upset if they drafted a receiver in the first round? Is that a priority for you?
It's not a priority it's not a high priority from a team perspective, like as far as the overall needs, but from my perspective, but it is something I'd be totally happy to see them do because of what we talked about earlier. That is where there's depth and talent in this draft. And if you can come out of there with a blue chip player and you end up with multiple blue chip receivers, you do it. You don't look back. You don't question about, well, we really need that defensive pass rush. So we're going to take a guy that sucks and maybe someday will maybe be good. you take a receiver that you have high confidence will turn into a good player. So I'll be absolutely happy to do it. I think the bigger question, or the interesting question to me, is what kind of receiver? Because there's so many kinds of receivers in this draft. There's the guy from USC. Is it Pittman?
Pittman. It's my favorite guy.
Big receivers. You've got some fast receivers. You've got some slot receivers. And that's the part that's interesting to me of like, you want another DK? Is that the right thing to want in this draft? I'm curious if you guys have a point of view on that.
That's a really interesting thing, right? Like, I think that wide receiver can be a big impact pick for them. It's hard to say it's a need by any stretch, but I think it could have a massive impact. But then you start looking at the guys. Okay, who are the guys that kind of fit with Lockett and DK? And there's an interesting list. Like, I think Pittman is in there. I think T. Higgins is a guy. Brian Edwards is a guy that maybe isn't a sweet spot if you're looking at like a third round wide receiver or something like that. But then you can start to like second guess yourself and be like, okay, well, we just said that we're gonna go and get a receiver, or we're okay taking a receiver because we're not gonna worry about what we have, right? We're just gonna go get that blue chipper. And then, so do you really want to worry about who fits well with Tyler and DK?
Is there a Golden Tate like a running back style receiver where or like Taylor Gabriel, where it's like you throw it to him in space and that guy just makes people miss or runs people, over? Is that guy in the draft?
There's a few. There's definitely a lot of like yak guys. Like KJ Hamler is maybe more of a Taylor Gabriel type. For Golden Tate, I think maybe you're thinking someone like Brandon Ayuk.
That's exactly
more
what
of that build. Say. Yeah, he's got some big red flags around like production and stuff like that. Which, hey, DK had production flags too, but Brandon Ayuk's not built like DK. So I don't know that you can make the same excuses for him, but he's probably, if you're really trying to hone in on a Golden Tate, that's probably the guy.
Speaking of Golden Tate and receiver need, did you guys see the Percy Harvin report today?
I don't hate that. I mean, I did. And
okay, hold up. You can't just say I don't hate that and not follow up. So you have to follow up that.
I don't hate that.
You don't hate the Seahawks potentially bringing back Percy Harvin?
Yeah. Why not? What are they going to do? Punch Tyler Lockett? Come on.
He might.
That'd be fine. Tyler's sturdy-ish. We're not talking about trading a first round pick and giving the guy like $15 million or whatever. We're talking about bringing him in and saying like, work your ass off, and if not, we'll cut you. They're good at this. This is what they're. Well, I mean, you can now turn around and point to Ziggy on me. All right, and so maybe not. They're not always great, but generally, this is what they're good at. This is when they churn these kind of guys, and yeah, let's if nothing else,
dude, he has legit CTE. Like, that is not a guy. Like,
he says he's doing well mentally, and emotionally, and everything. He's going to place. Yeah. But if he's not, then you cut him. Like, it's not hard. It's zero risk.
Percy Harvin is 28 days from turning 32 years old.
So he's still younger than LJ Collier?
I set you up so perfectly for that.
Jeff does not get old.
Oh my! I swear I'm not making this up. I legitimately had a dream last night that Percy Harvin was back on the Seahawks, just randomly, and then I woke up. And I swear to God,
before the
report, like there was no like, I didn't see anything, nothing, and I woke up and I literally like thought like, wait a second. Am I still dreaming, or like, is this sound like, what is going on? It was so weird. Like, I don't know how that happened, but my first reaction is Nathan's. I'm like, yeah, he's a freaking amazing athlete. That could be kind of fun. My second reaction is, oh my God, that would be so stupid. Do not do that. So I don't.
Wow. Is this Pete Carroll slander? Can Pete Carroll not control a locker room with Percy Harvin in it? If only a culture coach, then maybe we can take these kind of gambles.
Can Pete Carroll control a locker room with like Jeffrey Dahmer in it? I mean, there's people that have mental challenges.
Wow. Whoa.
That's a stretch.
That's overboard. Like, come on. Percy's not that bad.
No, but he has got
eaten 0 people that I'm aware of.
He's not eaten anybody, but it wouldn't be surprising me if he took a bite out of somebody. I mean, the guy's, he's got issues.
That's actually fair.
He's got issues. So, anyway, any more Patreon questions there, Evan?
Somebody asked, does the new CBA affect Josh Gordon? This is all TBD. I know he's currently in the reinstatement process with the commissioner. I would assume we hear something in the next few months, but I would not bank on him being back. That's for sure.
Okay. All right. Well, let's tell people about what's going to happen tomorrow. Talk about when coverage is going to start. When does the draft even start? When are they going to start hearing from us?
That is a phenomenal question because I can't remember if the draft is 4 or 5 p.m. Pacific time tomorrow. Is it 5? Jeff says 5 p.m. Pacific time. So what does that mean? You guys can obviously tune into the draft on YouTube or on your TV, ABC, ESPN, NFL Network, whatever you're watching. But if you want to listen to our commentary, we're going to have our live Slack thread on YouTube, same exact format, broadcasted via Zoom, live Slack thread during non-Seattle picks, and then live video reactions like we're doing right now during Seattle's actual pick that hopefully happens in the first round. You can have it up on your phone. You can tune in on Slack, interact with us if you're a Patreon member. If you're not a Patreon member, subscribe. You get default access to it, and it's going to be a fun time. We're really excited about it. And like I said, it's a first time for us doing the live Slack thread. So if you guys hate it, let us know. If you love it, let us know. Either way, let us know. So we're excited.
Yeah, I definitely, as the Seahawks come closer, we're definitely going to go live on video. And I'm really looking forward to seeing the faces on this pod when the Seahawks do whatever they're going to do. It should be fun. All right. With that, I'm just going to ask everybody, if you haven't already, click subscribe, smash the like button. I think that's what you're supposed to say. And then, sign up over at patreon.com/hawkblogger. Give us a review on iTunes, Spotify, wherever you want to go, Google Play. And we will see you all tomorrow and the next day and the day after that. So you're going to get plenty of us, more of us than you'll ever want to see again. And who knows? The Seahawks make lots of moves during the draft. They sometimes draft players. They often trade players. This team could look and will look probably meaningfully different in 3 days. Thank God. With that, go Hawks. Have a wonderful night. Everybody take care. Good night.